You've teased something that's going to revolutionize the hiring industry.
I'm building something for that.
Welcome to Hired the Podcast, a conversation with the best and brightest hiring minds across the industry. I'm Travis Miller, and today I'm talking with Josef Stetter. Josef is a resume whisperer who's helped over 11,000 people land their dream jobs. Also the author of 10 books and a corporate culturist who has worked with large and small companies to enhance their overall work culture, improving performance and efficiencies. Plus, he's got a hell of a journey to get to where you are today. Josef, I wouldn't say that you have the most conventional path to your current position, but it kind of makes sense.
Listen, I don't think that the experts that really know what they're doing have had a conventional path to anything. And thank you again, Trevor, for having me on the show. At the end of the day, I think we live in a society where, government tells you need to study this. Your parents and your cultural background say this is the path that you need to have. And we're not really taught to question it. So my path forced me to question it, I guess.
So let's talk a little bit about your path. How many jobs did you have? How many different careers did you have before you ended up where you were?
So I've switched careers 9 times and jobs over 18 times because I didn't know what I want to do when I grew up. So I got to a point where I became the best in the company and I got bored. So I either quit or I got fired because I stopped caring. And along the process kind of realized, okay, let me start doing self-development, try to figure out what my passion is, what my purpose is. And as I started doing self-development courses, I kind of took a step back and went, how come nobody's applying this to a job? How come nobody's applying this to interviewing candidates to better understand them? So, from the candidate side, like I remember doing the Tony Robbins Walk of Fire. And there's an exercise where to prepare you mentally to walk across 40 feet of burning coals, he spends 5 or 6 hours kind of getting all the fear out of you and then building up that memory muscle of, I can do anything. And, it was a phenomenal experience. And then after the weekend was done and I was home and I was on the high, I sat and reflected and went, how come no one's talking to people about, being different on your resume? How come interviews still ask generic, tell me about this job questions and getting the autoresponder? And then I started building systems and formulas and, volunteered my time at various government associations and various colleges, universities to lecture and kind of go, here's some ideas for you. And all of a sudden I started getting people going, oh my God, even this little nugget of information made such a difference. Thank you. And so that led me to the path of being a resume whisperer and a corporate culturist.
You touched on something very interesting that I think is really important, and that's the questioning in an interview. And I didn't plan to necessarily start here, but it's something that just sticks with me. I mean, we're in the recruiting business. This is a business about curiosity. This is a business that's about asking questions. And if you think about it, most jobs, being curious and asking great questions is an incredibly imperative skill. And I can't fathom how many interviews I have with people where it's not an interview even. It's not a conversation. And I try and give people so many opportunities to ask questions, to find out more about me, to find out more about the company. And they'll say, tell me about a typical day. And I'll take the time to give them a thoughtful answer. And then I ask if they have any more questions, and they say no. And the thought of taking a position without having curiosity about the organization you're going to be joining and the people you're going to be doing it with blows my mind. And I have such a difficult time hiring people who don't ask good questions. Tell me about your process for helping people in the interview process ask good questions.
So, as part of investing 30,000 hours to master everything there is to know about job finding, I've created a list of 300 questions that you could potentially ask an interviewer. And again, the beauty of it is I've bolded the ones that are really good, and I also explain when I coach people that don't be a robot that's asking this exactly. So if your language palette is more simple, don't use the words in my questions, rephrase it in your own words. So 3 of my favorite questions to teach people to ask at the end of the interview. The first question is, what would you say is the biggest obstacle for success in this position? And then whatever the interviewer tells me is the obstacle, even if you've already spoken about it in the interview, you remind that interview of your experience with this and why this won't be a problem, right? The second question that I have that I love to ask is, if I were hired tomorrow, what is the first thing I can do to make an immediate impact? And so when I emphasize the word immediate impact, the interviewer is also starting to go, okay, this person wants to produce results rather than this person needs a paycheck, for example. And so it separates the idea, because when you go, oh, you know what, we're struggling, let's say, with our, Instagram response rates. So if you're hiring for somebody who's in the marketing world, they're going to start giving you strategies right then and there if they're very good at what they're doing. And the third question that I love to ask is, of other people that currently hold this position or have held this position, what are some of the characteristics that you would like to see repeated? Now, this is where you're also going to define to me the corporate culture, because if you say, well, we need someone who's very proactive, again, when I teach this to people, so what does proactive mean to you? Because like someone that goes, here's an idea, is a little bit maybe too squirrely kind of thing. But there's a level where there's a genuine interest and engagement in what's working, what's not working, because sometimes it's a subtle thing. So going back to interviewing the candidate, most interviewers will say, tell me about this job. And autoresponsor kicks in. My duties were, my responsibilities were, I know how to do X, Y, and Z. Or, some of the more generic, I'm a really great team player, I love my job, kind of there. And your reaction is perfect to that.
Yeah, it's either already on the resume or it's made up bullshit.
Or it's all ChatGPT kind of thing. So I will adjust the question to say, let's say one of 3 versions. So what was your biggest accomplishment in your last job? And why? Give me the details on what made this such an accomplishment. And so now, whether they're using STAR, ADA, SMART, or any other formulaic version of answering, here's the situation, here's the task, here's the action, here's the result, in whatever order that they put that in, they're painting you a clear picture of whether or not they know, or, what are your 3 biggest contributions? So I call it the 9 power words of interview. So proud, significant, success, contributions, achievements, accomplishments, results, importance, and impact. So those 9 words, at the end of the interview, I'm also asking questions with using those 9 words to my interviewers. And that's kind of what I teach people. So, if you're interviewing me, Travis, and you ask me what questions I had, say, okay, strategically speaking, what is one of the obstacles that you're facing right now to, let's say, level up your podcast hired and take it to, Joe Rogan level, for example, right? At which point, whether it's your own social media presence, whether it's the guests that you have, whether it's this, there's a kind of response, which, again, if I'm listening to you and shattering your energy, I can then say, have you thought of this, or have you thought of this? And now, even if you've done those strategies, the fact that I'm thinking about those for you shows you that I'm now trying to process how to get you to the next level.
A framework that I've always liked for this response is we refer to it as a FAB statement, is an acronym you're familiar with. Yeah, feature, achievement, benefit. So you have this problem, and the candidate then is able to say, so you have this problem. I have this feature, which I have achieved a result similar to the problem you're facing. I have solved it before, which means that if I were to come utilize this feature at your company, I could achieve this, which would directly benefit you this way. Very simple framework, and they start to subconsciously in their mind picture you at their company. When I'm at your company, I will utilize this feature to achieve this for you to directly benefit you. And they start to think of you as already working there, whether they like it or not.
Right. And there is, nuances to that again, make it about them, not about you. So when you're being interviewed, no matter what they ask you, it's always about them. Once you get hired, it's about you actually proving that you can produce for them. But, like when you have someone who's, let's say, going for their first job, typically speaking, they don't have work experience. So an employer will ask about their extracurriculars, like, if you play soccer or football, depending on, the language that you use. And they go, okay, tell me about soccer. They really don't care that you play soccer for 10 years. Mm-hmm. They care about that your commitment, your passion for soccer is the kind of commitment you're going to give them. And that's how you're going to come and approach the job. And so part of it is transitioning candidates and from, I've been doing this for 20 years. I know what I'm doing to here's how great I am. And here's what you lose if you don't hire me. Mm-hmm. Right. So I was talking to a CFO off LinkedIn and literally looked at his LinkedIn profile. It just kind of said CFO, this company, this dates of year. CFO, this company, this dates of hire. And I looked at him and said, have you done any mergers and acquisitions? He said, nope. I said, have you done any complex financial simulations? He goes, nope. I said, have you? So I go, okay, so just because you have a title that says CFO doesn't mean you fit every CFO role that's posted. Mm-hmm. So if you've never done mergers and acquisitions, don't apply for a company that says we need someone who has experience with that because we're in acquisition stage, for example. Mm-hmm. Right. And I think that, we've become so used to kind of going, but I've done this for 20 years. No, you haven't done this for 20 years. You've had a title for 20 years. The responsibilities of the title vary from one company to the next. And especially North America now, we're in a generation where people love to give themselves titles. I worked for a private college where the receptionists were known as director of first impressions. So you're cute. Like, oh, director? No, they were still a receptionist, but the title made it sound more important. I have a resume of a woman that worked in a grocery store as a cashier, but she wasn't a cashier. She was a financial transactions specialist. Right. So when you're kind of reading some of these titles,
you can have a lot of fun with this.
Yeah. So this is where I said it's very important that the interviewer gets away from the cookie cutter, standard check mark, you said this word, check mark, you said this word. And whether it's the FAB method or any other acronym that you've kind of learned over the time, at the end of the day, it's show me that you know how to do this and produce results in it. Mm-hmm. And more importantly, that if I hire you, you should produce better results than you did in your previous company because you already had the learning curve there. And so now you're at that higher level of implementation.
So it sounds like you do a fair amount of coaching people on how to identify the jobs that they're most likely to be successful. Do you also help people optimize their brand, their social profiles, the output that they're putting out there so that they can be approached by companies for positions that they're ideal for?
Hence the kind of title of resume whisperer because I can make a janitor sound like a brain surgeon. A lot of it is in the wording. So I was speaking to someone yesterday and I said, okay, look, if you've worked in IT, for example, right? And you've worked on the field services tech support as an example, okay? I don't care that you know how to use Team Viewer to check if my computer is working or not. I need to know how you solve problems. I need to know how quickly, how efficiently you can solve problems better than other people. So, in kind of crafting his resume, he had a project for a Fortune 500 company where there was 18 technicians that couldn't figure out why the security cameras were not working. And then he explained to me how he traced the cabling kind of camera by camera to see if there was any loose connections or any splits. And then he found kind of an old camera that was still plugged in but not working. And so he came up with a creative solution to kind of bypass that camera in the circuit in order to make sure that all the security cameras worked. But again, the fact that he did it after 3 teams and 18 other technicians came in is what I care about. The specifics of he did this or did that. Again, I'm not a techie guy that I need to know that specific. I just need to know that he had that problem solving ability or that, ingenuity or curiosity from a level of doing that. And so a lot of times the first thing that I tell people when you make statements on your resume and then in an interview, there needs to be the so what, who cares, what's in it for them, or what's the end result in your statement. So, if again, I'm going to go through a few kind of different professions. So, if I look at my background and I say, okay, I'm an excellent salesperson. I know how to do B2B, B2C, account management, relationship building, lead generation. I've worked retail. I've done door-to-door sales. I've done car sales. I've worked in private education. I've done recruiting. I'm an amazing salesperson. Great. I've given you a lot of lingo that is required for the algorithms for Indeed and LinkedIn in terms of the technical. But I haven't told you whether or not I know how to sell. I just told you that I've worked in sales. So if I then quantify and say, okay, as a sales leader, for example, I was asked to build a call center from scratch. And the expectation was for a company that owns multiple private colleges across Canada. And the expectation was that my team will generate an extra $300,000 to $350,000 for the year, with restrictions that my team is not allowed to call any leads that are less than 4 months old and less than 50, 60 miles away from the nearest campus. In less than 6 months, my team did $2.25 million on a budget of $300,000 for the year. So now, if you're going to hire me as your salesperson, now I've intrigued you to go, how did you do that? And as long as I can show you my leadership style that got those results, I've already shown you that if you hired me as your salesperson, these are the kind of results you can expect because I 8 times the expectations. Because I implemented strategy, I created a culture, and I followed through on both of them to make sure that the results spoke for themselves, kind of thing. Right? So, and this is where most people, when I speak to people and they come to me and, I've had the honor and the pleasure of helping almost 12,000 people, a lot of times it's, I don't know how to quantify what I do. I don't know. And I don't feel comfortable to say it. And I said, listen, it doesn't have to be an exact. You can say over 10%, over this. It's because, again, if I use corporations like Google, the odds that anyone comes into Google and improves, let's say, Google by more than 20% is very small because Google is already milliseconds of production when you do a Google search kind of thing. So I don't expect, realistically, 20% at Google might be very, very hard. But if I take a company like, what's new? FreshBooks. It's an online accounting platform.
Okay.
That exploded in 5 years. So in those 5 years, the likelihood that you could have created 20% improvements was very likely because of the level that they grew, where they grew from like 20 people to 150 people in about a year. And so it was expected that you were going to kind of, if you were good, produce certain levels of results. So it's not the number itself, it's that there is a number. And it's up to you to discern whether that number is enough. So if you're hiring a receptionist, rather than a receptionist saying, I know how to answer the phone, really, in North America, you know how to press the green button, go hello, right? You can, if the receptionist says, I'm capable of answering 60 calls a day with 12 different lines, 60 calls a day with 12 lines, you go, well, I only have 5 lines. I generally get 30 calls. This person can handle more than double. Good. I'm confident that this person can do the work easily. And because they can do it so easily, maybe give them other duties that will make my day more efficient, or otherwise things in the company more efficient, for example.
So it'd be fantastic if everybody was able to quantify their talents and skills to make it easy for someone doing the hiring to understand what they're capable of. But we know they're not.
Not yet.
Not yet. Well, you're only at 12,000.
I'm building something for that.
So in the meantime, what can the people doing the hiring do to uncover a person's true talent in the specific areas that they need the most help in?
Again, so I think it's changing the wording of the conversation. So focus on the results, focus on the contributions, focus on, like I said, the 9 words where it's like, okay, in this job, what was the most complicated thing that you had to solve? So if you ask what was the most complicated thing, and that is 3 times more complex than what you're concerned about, that person can handle whatever you're going to throw at them, right? If that most complicated thing is significantly less than what what was the achievements, right? So in sales, again, yes, there's what's the word I'm looking for? Kind of preconceived, if you've done, let's say, retail sales, that's different than doing recruiting sales, or it's different than doing, IT sales. The only difference is the cycle it takes to close a deal. Because in retail sales, you can close it right then and there. In recruiting, it might be 1 to 3 conversations, depending on how good you are at explaining your services and so forth. If you're doing IT sales, generally speaking, IT sales are millions of dollars in revenue. So you're never going to close them on the first date kind of thing. It's always going to be like, okay, let me take you out for dinner. Why don't we go golfing? Because you have C-level executives that have to come together and agree to invest millions of dollars, for example. So to me, sales is sales. It's just a matter of, do you know the processes? Do you know the systems? And so, again, when we get away from, tell me about this job, what were your duties, and get into, okay, you were an engineer, let's say a mechanical engineer, right? What kind of calculations did you need to make? Why did you need to make them? What was the most complicated solution you solved? Or what was your biggest accomplishment? And all of a sudden, you're forcing people to kind of share more because they don't think about it, but you're guiding them. So if someone says, well, you know what, I coded a website. Okay. How fast did you code this website? How extensive was the coding? How many layers? How many this? Like, I interviewed somebody that coded Amazon Prime, right? So the moment he said Amazon Prime, where he's talking to me about getting a result in 0.0001 of a second or whatever, I was like, damn, I don't need to ask much more because Amazon Prime gives you the credibility automatically, kind of thing.
Kind of, but in a huge organization and such a huge project like that, I'm curious, how much credit can they claim for that? Because there's got to be massive teams and checks and balances into how does an individual, or how does somebody interviewing that individual, how do they really discern what somebody what role
Again,
someone
break
actually
down
played.
what were their kind of projects that they were involved in. So was it the video side? Was it the picture side? Was it the auto response side of things? So one of a good friend of mine, he was one of the programmers for Bing, right? And so again, it's a massive undertaking. Take now the world's gone crazy with chat GPTs and the explosion of AI. Okay, so when you're coding that, how are you kind of creating code that goes into the data lake and able to go, there's a million of this, boom, this is your result kind of thing, in an instant, right? So there is ways of discerning what it is that you did, what is the specifications, because again, even as new technologies comes out, like as I mentioned, I hinted that I'm in the process of putting together something that will completely revolutionize not only corporate culture, but the hiring and the candidate side of experience, because I'm going to combine both the technical and the soft skills, right? And have 360 views on them. Now, there's a lot of stuff that exists right now. So I don't necessarily need to reinvent everything that exists from scratch. With APIs and other ways, there's ways of me forming partnerships, joint ventures, access to their APIs to be able to take what this data gives me and put it here to manipulate it even further, kind of thing. So if you look at something like Uber was first to market, and then Lyft came out of it and a few others. Airbnb was first to market, then Vrbo came out, then cottage rentals came out. Same technology, just the manipulation of data is different, and the source of information or the use of information is different. So again, a good interviewer will go, okay, you worked on this. Tell me the specifics that you worked on that are not kind of restricted confidential information, that you can tell me at least why you were involved, or what elements were you responsible for. So I'm not asking you to tell me the code itself. I'm asking you to tell me the kind of process used to go from this to this and produce results, right? Whether or not you can quantify each single result, again, this is where individuals need to take ownership, where a C-level executive says, I was the visionary. A director says, I took the vision and created a strategy. A manager says, I took the strategy and created the teams, right? And then the individual said, I did this part of the strategy and the team and so forth. So as you go higher up, there's less of the day-to-day minutia and more of, here's the vision, here's the communication of the vision, and here's kind of what this vision will, or where this vision will take us, right? So if you're in an entry-level position, your job is to execute whatever the layers above you have told you are necessary to get to the vision, for example, right? And we're in a kind of twist where, millennials as part kind of feel that they're owed. So they graduate high school and go, I should start at $150,000 salary because, I graduated high school and I did co-op. And then they haven't learned the responsibility. They haven't learned, like, just because you have theory. And I see this a lot with some of my recruiting clients where they'll go, we'll hire a fresh MBA and save $50,000, $60,000 on salary because we don't want to pay for someone who has 20 years of experience. But the person that has the 20 years of experience has earned the right to say, I've dealt with this, not just the theory of it.
Yeah, you might save 20 to 50 grand, but what's it going to cost you?
And you're seeing, look at how many recalls there is with automotive. Look at how many recalls there is with, products being pushed, and then they kind of go, yeah, we really didn't do our due diligence. The banking industry, like, they're getting hit with hundreds of millions of dollars in fines because they don't know their client, they don't know their business, they don't know their investor. They don't do their due diligence on the paperwork, on the ID verification, on this, and they're like, we're a bank, but we're doing transactions internationally, but we don't care what's happening over there. We only care what's over happening here. And all of a sudden, all this fraud is happening. right? So you have to do your due diligence. So now banks are starting to hire more and more regulatory and compliance because they're understanding it's not, you're building a software platform right now. There are multitude of compliance that you need to address in terms of, Web3 and how you access information, how you store and share information. That, again, I'm not a techie guy, but I surround myself with people that are smarter than me that can tell me, have you looked at this? No, why do I need to look at that? Oh, okay, da, 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 da. So I'm the visionary. I can go, I want this to happen, and here's how I want, let's say, I did a flow chart, here's how information will be gathered. Then I go to my, like, I have very smart people around me that go, have you considered this? Explain. And they explain. I go, no, that's why you're part of the team, because I know this should happen. The layers below it is not where my brain's at, for example.
So a couple minutes ago and a couple of times throughout this conversation, you've been playing coy. You've teased something that's going to revolutionize the hiring industry. I'm working on this. What is it, Joseph? You can't just drop that and leave it there. What are you doing to revolutionize the hiring industry?
I'm creating a platform that will force candidates to give me data that says, here's the results I produced, here's the technical skills that I have, and they're ranked, kind of thing.
Okay.
And it's going to force companies to stop giving me cookie cutter job descriptions because they went on Indeed and copied somebody else's, and there's no information there that's relevant to me. Like, as a recruiter, my first question when I get a client is, why have you not hired anybody? What's missing? So if I'm using coders as an example, there's a very big difference between a coder who's worked in a bank or at an Amazon where, like you said, it's such a massive base and there's structures and documentation for everything, versus someone who's worked in a startup where there is no structure and they have to build the structure, right? So there's a separation right there. It's a small separation. So it's not Java is Java. It's Java, but from scratch, where nothing exists. Now, if you're resourceful to use some of the pre-existing, like Vue.js or Node.js or whatever that can make things easier because you can integrate APIs and do it, that's your genius. That's, not my genius. But what I'm also going to do, and this is where there's a massive gap and this relates to kind of the interview, is that the difference between, let's say, being a engineer or a software developer and becoming a manager or becoming a director are the character skills or the soft skills, right? So someone can say, we need someone to be good at presentations. Well, what standard are you using to create presentations, right? Because if I compare myself to Les Brown, one of my heroes I've admired and had the pleasure of meeting, kind of thing, he's made tens of millions of dollars, if not hundreds of millions of dollars, as a motivational speaker. Relative to his earning level, I don't have excellent communication skills. I teach communications, right? I teach people public speaking. So I've done Toastmasters, where one of the things that I appreciate about Toastmasters is that as part of their meetings, they count how many times you say filler words, and, or, like, but, and so forth. And the more they counted, the more cognizant I became of how much that becomes part of my conversation. So now, yes, I'll still have filler words. I'm not a robot, but I am cautious, or I'm aware of them so that it's not there. So, and to tie that in, and this is where I'm going to, if I may, I remember listening to Kenneth Cole give a speech on how Kenneth Cole's shoes came about. He pulled out a 36-page speech and read it word for word, and it was probably one of the worst speeches I've ever heard from an oration side of things. But when he explained to me how simple his genius was, where basically he just signed a contract with a leather manufacturer to make shoes. And there was this massive shoe conference where all the stores order their merchandise for the year in New York. And it was too late for him to get a booth. So he called the city and asked for a permit to have a truck on 5th and Saks there. And the representative of the city started laughing and said, nobody in New York gets a permit for that corner unless you're shooting a commercial or a movie. So he went to Kinko's and changed his business name from Kenneth Cole to Kenneth Cole Productions. One word. And then called and said he needs a permit to Saks and Fifth Avenue to shoot a shoe commercial. And he brought, a couple of director's chair. He had the camera, like he rented the camera equipment. He had a few friends come in and pretend they're acting. He created so much buzz that every shoe store that was walking into this conference came to his truck first, and he sold 350,000 pairs of shoes over the weekend. All from one word. Now, listening to a 36-page speech, I was like, holy smokes. And he even joked at the end of the speech that that's why he never presents. He hires marketers or people that know how to speak to do Kenneth Cole presentations. But the genius of one word was like, wow. And that was aha. So I'm taking my platform and going, okay, so here's 10 different standards for communication. So if you don't like any of these standards, you now can create your own training and development in-house, for example. And you're going to do that through mentoring. You're going to do that through your current leaders, and you're going to take what they're really good at and bring it back into the coworkers so that you can groom people. So someone who's proactive, someone who's problem solving, someone that, like the beginning of our conversation, Travis, you can kind of groom them to become the next director. And so even though they're currently entry-level job, you're grooming their soft skills. You're grooming some of the technical skills of being a visionary, finding out strategy, making decisions, because again, the higher up you go, the less it's the day-to-day, it's more of the vision, the strategy, and the ability to communicate that.
Yeah.
So I'm going to force people to focus, and I'm going to have data that kind of shows here's how people think, here's their communication style, here's their leadership style, so that you can tell where the gaps are. So if I'm going to replace you, Travis, and I need to work on speaking less, listening more. That's one of the things that I'm aware that always needs to be improved. Great. Travis, you're going to be my mentor, and you're going to teach me techniques to ask very precise questions so that I can step in to replace you so that you are running a bigger conglomerate, for example. And that's where I think the conversation is changing, because the pandemic has proven that the world of e-learning is exploding exponentially right now. The problem is there's no standard in the market.
Okay.
And so there's no standard. Like, I've seen job descriptions for C-level executives where it says, we need a visionary and a strategist. That was the entire job description for a C-level executive.
What on earth does that mean?
Exactly, right? And there's no specific of what experience, what background, what kind of skill sets do you want. So people go and, companies, or at least their HR teams, have started adding a lot of, we're the best company ever since sliced bread. Working for us is heavenly. And so they start using catchy phrases like, we need someone who is, super passionate. And someone will go, I'm super passionate. About what? How does that relate to the job? How does that translate to you being able to perform? So I think the more we can hone in on job descriptions that says we need someone to solve these problems, right? Yes, America is all about competition and so forth. But if I use other countries in the world, Germany, in high school, you start doing certain tests, and based on the scoring of a test, they change the path of high school that you go, oh, you're very creative. We're going to put you on the creative path of high school. you're very analytical. Let's put you like engineering path of high school. And so you can take some of that data and say, okay, how can we centralize? So I'm both left brain and right brain. I can be very creative when I need to be, but I'm also super analytical. But if there's assessments that give insights that, this is how I can solve things, or this is how my brain works, great. Now we can match more realistically. There's an element of culture where, someone who is from the Middle East generally speaks louder. Just because they're speaking louder doesn't mean you're in trouble. It's just the communication style. So what if there was a roadmap that said, here are certain things that you need to be aware of other cultures, so that, if you come from another culture and you're more soft-spoken or you're more this, understand this kind of creates gaps for you. And so I'm trying to paint a complete picture. There's a lot of phenomenal tools out there. I'm not saying that there isn't, but they give a small piece of the puzzle. I'm actually trying to kind of go, let's take multiple and create standardization and create levels where, let's say, the technical terms in engineering, let's say there's 100 words that are technically associated with a mechanical engineer. Let's force people to go, how many of these hundreds that you have? But if I force you, Travis, to say, here, let's say you have 80 of these 100 words, but the company only posted 60 words, now I can score you on 60 words, not on 80, right? And if you rank the skills that you want, and I force companies to rank their skills, all of a sudden I can even more accurately go, Travis has, let's say, 50 of the 60 skills that you're looking for, but of your top 10, he actually has 9. So do you care about the other 40 as much, or do you want the 9 first?
Probably not. Well, it's all about putting together the puzzle. And I'm sorry that we didn't get time to talk about the culture piece of it, because that's a huge piece of the puzzle. But if companies could do a better job of truly understanding the problems that they need solved and searching for that, and people could do a better job
and this
of
is where I'm
assessing.
going to use the analogy, if I may. Sorry for cutting you off, but like Undercover Boss, it's one of my favorite shows. At the end of every episode, the executives go, oh my God, I should speak to the people some work here. I might get some insights. Because a lot of the executives sit in their quote unquote ivory tower, look at an Excel spreadsheet and say, we need to make this number bigger or better. And they forget the human factor. They forget that human beings need the water cooler conversations to talk about TV and music and Taylor Swift and the Super Bowl, because it allows the mind to refresh. I'll just finish with this, and this is where part of culture and part of what I'm building is that I was speaking to my uncle, who was the president of Spar Aerospace, which is the equivalent of NASA in Canada. We're having dinner, and he was telling me how his software developers and engineers sometimes get so focused on solving a problem that they forget to eat. I said, I want you to do a little bit of experiment. I want you to send somebody from your company once a week to Costco and buy fruits, granola bars, cookies, gummy bears, chocolate, whatever, and leave it in the office. Leave it in the lunchroom. And I want you to track productivity. Productivity increased by 20% because the engineers grabbed a few cookies and went back to their desk to solve the problem. But because of the fact that they stopped and went to eat something, their brain functioned clear. And so a lot of companies forget the importance of having free coffee. For example, as much as people might love their Starbucks, the level of knowing that it's free in the office and knowing that you don't need to spend money, even if you still prefer to go across the street and get your coffee, will increase productivity. And so it's not just about the profits and losses, or KPIs that are, this is what drives a company. It's the behind the scenes of, okay, you need to groom, like you're going to be a C-level executive, you need to groom the next director. What are the gaps that exist between a C-level and a director that you need to start mentoring your replacement to make sure that there's very little learning transition errors kind of thing? And this is where we have a big gap, because a lot of companies just kind of go, you're a really good worker. Let's promote you.
Yeah.
And there's no support structure to kind of go, are you ready for the promotion? You might be ready in terms of strategy, but you don't know how to communicate to your coworkers, right? And this is where culture plays a big fact in having data that can go, oh, instead of just donating money to feed the homeless and getting a tax receipt, why don't we ask our employees what they actually care about and donate the same money, get the same tax receipt, get the same PR, but now we've engaged our employees. Now our employees want to work here rather than feel miserable and hate their job, which sadly 80 to 90% of people hate in North America.
Yeah. Well, all the CEOs listening, go grab a cookie and figure it all out in a quiet moment. Josef, this has been great. I really appreciate it. If people want to reach out to you, what's the best way for them to find you?
So Josef Stetter is my name. On all social media, it's the same. So there's josefstetter.com, and then there's the celebrategroup.com. Both websites, are there, but LinkedIn, Facebook are where I'm most active in terms of social media. And I'm the only Josef Stetter there. And if you're not sure, because there is a duplicate of my profile, just click on the profile between the podcast, the books, the articles. It's all there. You'll find me pretty easily.
Josef Stetter, this has been great. This has been Hired the Podcast. Please subscribe to get notified of all future episodes when they come. Big thank you to Noah Cuff, our producer, and we'll talk to you all soon.
Thank you very much, everybody, and thank you for the opportunity.
Thanks, Josef.